So imagine you're watching a baseball game, right? It's the playoffs.
Okay, setting the scene.
Yeah, and right in the middle of the game, the captain of the Yankees just um, takes off his jersey, puts on a Red Sox uniform, and literally walks into the opposing dugout
Just mid-inning.
mid-inning and expects everyone to just, be totally fine with it.
Right, like that's just a normal Tuesday.
Exactly. I mean, that is essentially what happened in the House of Commons on April 8th. Because a staunch social conservative, someone who fought the legalization of cannabis, vocally opposed the conversion therapy ban, and, oh yeah, co-chaired Pierre Poilievre's Ontario leadership campaign, just walked across the aisle.
To join Mark Carney's progressive liberal government, I mean, it's wild.
It's the kind of political realignment that literally makes you do a double take.
Yeah.
Like you have to check your calendar to make sure you aren't hallucinating.
Eee.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a massive stack of incredibly fast-moving political sources, insider reports, polling data, local reactions, and we're basically unpacking the mechanics of a political earthquake.
Yeah, and the mission for today's deep dive is really to look at the sudden historic consolidation of Prime Minister Mark Carney's government here in April 2026. Because, this consolidation isn't happening through an election.
No, not at all.
It's being driven by this unprecedented wave of floor-crossing members of parliament. And directly tied to that, we are looking at the resulting internal crisis that is currently just tearing the Conservative Party apart from the inside.
But wait, before we go one step further, we have to do our mandatory disclaimer.
Right, yes. Very important.
We must explicitly state to you, the listener, that the sources we are unpacking today contain highly charged political developments, and they involve both left-wing and right-wing figures.
Yep.
So we are not taking any sides here. We are not endorsing any of the viewpoints or the actions or the politics we're about to discuss.
None of it. Our mission is strictly to impartially report and analyze the ideas and the data from the source material, so you can just understand the big picture.
Exactly. Because, I mean, the stakes in this source material are generationally high. We're tracking 4 conservative MPs who have jumped ship.
And a prime minister who's basically engineering a shortcut majority without consulting the broader electorate.
Plus a conservative leader facing a reported mutiny from 40 of his own MPs.
40.
Yeah, 40. And hanging over this entire domestic situation is the shadow of U.S. President Donald Trump's threatened tariffs.
It's a lot.
It's a massive amount to unpack. So let's start with the shockwave itself, because the sheer mechanics of this defection are staggering. Wednesday, April 8th, 2026, Marilyn Gladu,
Right.
the 4-time Conservative MP for Ontario's Sarnia-Lambton-Butchewanon, writing defects to the Liberals.
And she becomes the 5th opposition MP to cross the floor in recent months, and the 4th Conservative. She joins Chris d'Entremont from Nova Scotia, Michael Ma from Toronto, Matt Jeneroux from Edmonton, and Lori Idlout, who crossed over from the NDP.
See, the d'Entremont and Jeneroux defections, I mean, they were surprising.
Yeah.
But you could sort of chart the ideological drift there, right?
Yeah, they were considered moderates, people who felt the party was taking a hard right and leaving them behind.
Right, but Gladu defies that logic entirely. Like I mentioned, she is a deeply entrenched social conservative.
Yeah.
She literally ran for the party leadership in 2020.
Yeah, she was a crucial architect for Pierre Poilievre's 2022 campaign in Ontario.
So to look at this purely mechanically, this isn't just switching political teams. This is a hostile corporate takeover
Yeah.
where the chief operating officer of the rival firm suddenly shows up in your boardroom with the master keys.
It completely short-circuits how we understand partisan loyalty.
So what was her justification? How do you explain that to your voters?
Well, the justification she gave to the press hinges entirely on international geopolitics overriding domestic ideology.
Interesting.
Yeah, she cited the need for, quote, serious leadership against the very real threat of unjustified American tariffs. She basically said her constituents require a collaborative approach and a serious plan to build an independent Canadian economy.
Which effectively paints Prime Minister Carney as the only adult in the room capable of managing Donald Trump.
Exactly. She compartmentalized her social conservatism, right? She basically placed it secondary to national economic security.
Which, okay, I get that. That would be a fascinating ideological pivot if it weren't for the massive, glaring contradictions sitting in the parliamentary record.
Oh, the petition.
Yes, the petition. I'm looking at the sources detailing her actions just 3 months prior, in January 2026. Gladu publicly, loudly supported a House of Commons petition E7025.
And for anyone who doesn't know, that petition demanded that any MP who crosses the floor to join another party must immediately vacate their seat and trigger a by-election.
And she didn't just quietly sign it and move on. She went to her local newspaper and explicitly argued that constituents vote for a specific platform, not just a person.
She literally said, "We elected you under this banner, and if you don't want to be under that banner, then we deserve a chance to have a redo."
Right, so how does a veteran politician navigate the sheer hypocrisy of demanding an immediate by-election for floor crossers in January and then crossing the floor in April without resigning? Like, how does that work?
Well, politicians in this position, they basically rely on the assumption that localized, tangible benefits will eventually blind the electorate to the procedural hypocrisy.
Meaning they hope people will just care about the money.
Kind of, yeah. If we look at the immediate reaction in her writing, the sources show a deeply polarized electorate. I mean, the Writing Association is functionally decapitated. Residents are furious.
Oh, yeah, the quotes in the sources are brutal. Like, this is a conservative writing, and this liberal has no business being here. People who voted for a conservative platform in 2025 feel totally disenfranchised.
But then you have the local power brokers who are taking a completely different angle. The mayor of Sarnia, Mike Bradley, is leaning heavily into the pragmatism of the move.
What's his take?
Well, his reaction reveals the underlying strategy here. He acknowledged the local shock, but he immediately pivoted to the potential leverage because Sarnia is a massive energy hub for Eastern Canada.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so having an MP sitting on the government benches, especially a government trying to consolidate power, creates a direct pipeline to federal funding and attention. Bradley is already lobbying for Prime Minister Carney to visit the region.
So Gladu is betting her political life that by the time the 2029 election rolls around, her constituents will care way more about federal grants and protected energy jobs than they do about a petition she signed in 2026.
Exactly. She's gambling the entire farm on incumbency advantage and federal pork barrel politics.
Wow. But beyond her local riding, Gladu's defection fundamentally alters the operational math of the House of Commons record.
Big time. Her arrival brings the Liberals to 171 seats.
And what does that number actually mean for Carney?
It changes the entire nature of his premiership. So in a 343-seat House of Commons, 172 is the magic number for a bare majority.
Okay, 172.
But anyone who follows parliamentary procedure knows that governing at exactly 172 is an absolute nightmare.
Why is that?
Because if one of your MPs catches the flu, or, if someone's flight is delayed by a snowstorm in Ottawa, your government could theoretically fall on a confidence motion.
Just because someone got stuck in traffic.
Exactly. A functional, comfortable majority requires at least 173 seats. That way you can absorb the inevitable absences, and of course you lose the speaker's vote.
Right, because the speaker doesn't vote unless there's a tie. So Carney is sitting at 171. He is agonizingly close to neutralizing the opposition's ability to topple his government.
He is right on the line.
And he's trying to bridge that final gap without the messy, unpredictable variable of a general election. Which brings us to the three crucial by-elections scheduled for April 13.
Yeah, these are huge. 2 of those by-elections are happening in Toronto, Scarborough Southwest, and University Rosedale.
And those are seats vacated by former Liberal heavyweights, right? Bill Blair and Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah. And the data suggests these are fortress-level safe seats for the Liberals. The local riding associations are deeply entrenched. The demographic heavily favor the incumbent party, and parachute candidates typically perform very well there.
So if he wins both of those, that puts Carney exactly at 173.
The math checks out perfectly. If he secures Toronto, he secures the functional majority.
But political legitimacy isn't just a math equation.
No, it really isn't.
Because if Carney simply absorbs a handful of alienated conservatives and holds on to 2 downtown Toronto strongholds, the opposition is going to scream that he is governing on a backroom majority.
Oh, absolutely. They'll say he hasn't proven the broader Canadian public actually wants him in power.
Right. And that brings us to the third by-election on April 13th, taking place in the riding of Terrebonne, Quebec. This is where the mathematical necessity of a majority just violently collides with the optical necessity of a public mandate.
Terrebonne is fascinating because historically it is deep blue. It's a massive stronghold for the Bloc Québécois and the Parti Québécois. It is a region heavily invested in Quebec nationalism and regional representation.
Yet the Liberals somehow took it in the spring 2025 general election.
Barely. The Liberal candidate, Tatiana Auguste, beat the Bloc Québécois incumbent, Nathalie Sinclair de Gagné, by exactly 1 single vote.
1 vote. Out of tens of thousands cast, that is insane.
One single vote. And that margin triggered a massive legal battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada.
I remember reading this in the sources. The Bloc Québécois argued that Elections Canada made a strict clerical error involving the return addresses on mail-in ballots, and they claimed it disenfranchised at least one of their supporters.
Right, and the Supreme Court operates on incredibly strict compliance standards regarding electoral machinery. So because the margin of victory was literally a single ballot, they annulled the entire election result.
Which forces this total do-over on April 13th. But looking at the sources regarding the mechanics of this specific by-election, Terrebonne has devolved into absolute procedural chaos.
The logistical nightmare playing out there is, it's just unprecedented. First, the advanced polling turnout is massive.
Massive.
Roughly 20% of the voters list, representing over 18,200 people, have already voted.
Wow. And high advanced turnout in a by-election usually signals a highly motivated base, right? Often angry voters looking to punish the incumbent.
Often, yes. But the real chaos stems from a protest group called the Longest Ballot Committee.
Okay, I really want to dig into this, because how this protest group actually hijacked the electoral machinery highlights a massive vulnerability in how Elections Canada operates.
So the Longest Ballot Committee exploits the relatively low barrier to entry for federal candidates. To get on a federal ballot, you only need a small amount of paperwork and a few dozen signatures from local residents.
So what do?
By flooding the zone, this group managed to register 48 separate candidates for this single riding.
48 candidates.
Right.
Which completely breaks the physical limitations of the voting system. You just can't print a standard readable ballot with 48 names on it.
You really can't. So Elections Canada was forced to abandon the traditional printed ballot and switch to a write-in adapted ballot.
Wait. Explain how that works for the voter.
Voters walk into the booth with a literal blank piece of paper, and they have to physically write down the name of the candidate they want.
Think about the logistical friction that creates. You are asking voters to perfectly remember and spell the name of their candidate. You're going to see a massive spike in spoiled ballots due to illegible handwriting or misspelled names.
Oh, absolutely. And the hand counting process on election night is going to take hours, if not days, to verify voter intent on every single slip of paper.
It's just wild. But beyond the logistics, the political stakes in Terrebonne are monumental for Mark Carney. Moving from a minority to a majority government purely through floor crossings and by-elections is virtually unprecedented in modern Canadian history.
Yeah, the closest comparable precedent is Sir John A. Macdonald in the 19th century.
So winning Terrebonne isn't about hitting the 173-seat threshold, because he theoretically accomplishes that in Toronto.
Right. Winning Terrebonne is about proving that his government can pierce a nationalist stronghold.
It's the ultimate stress test. If the Liberals can win a riding that historically despises federalist overreach, it signals that Quebec voters are prioritizing the economic stability Carney promises over the regional sovereignty the Bloc represents.
And if the Liberals lose it, Pierre Poilievre and the Bloc will spend the next 3 years hammering Carney as an illegitimate, unelected premier who cobbled together a Frankenstein majority through cynical backroom deals.
Which provides the perfect transition to the absolute meltdown happening on the other side of the aisle. Because while Carney is meticulously piecing together a governing coalition, the Conservative Party under Pierre Poilievre is actively catching fire.
Yeah, the sources indicate up to 40 Conservative MPs are terrified of an electoral wipeout and are effectively in open mutiny.
And the internal polling data is driving this panic, right?
Exactly. Poilievre is currently registering as a massive 15-point drag on his own party's brand.
Okay, this is where I have to push back based on what we've read, because the timeline is giving me whiplash.
How so?
Well, 2 months ago, Poilievre survived a leadership review with an 87% mandate. A year ago, the Conservatives were enjoying a historic 25-point lead in the national polls. They secured over 41% of the popular vote in the 2025 election. How does a leader transition from a historic electoral high-water mark to facing an existential caucus revolt in a matter of weeks?
It's a great question. And the collapse is entirely rooted in a failure to adapt to a changing opponent.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So Poilievre built that massive lead through a highly aggressive, populist playbook. The tax campaign was incredibly effective at hammering Justin Trudeau on housing and the cost of living.
Right, he was very good at pointing out the flaws of the incumbent.
Exactly. And he bypassed traditional media. He leveraged long-form niche platforms like Joe Rogan's podcast and Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO to energize young men and the conservative base.
And that strategy is brilliant for a populist opposition leader trying to define himself against a tired, decade-old incumbent government.
Yes, but when Trudeau steps down and Mark Carney takes over a former central bank governor with a reputation as a moderate, pragmatic technocrat, the contrast completely shifts.
And Poilievre didn't pivot.
No, he continued running the exact same anti-establishment aggressive playbook against a man the public views as the ultimate establishment steady hand.
So what fires up the base on a podcast can deeply alienate older, moderate swing voters who are just looking for stability.
Precisely. And the Angus Reid and Abacus data numbers we have are just brutal. Poilievre's net favorability sits at -26.
-26. That's staggering.
And the crosstabs of that polling reveal the depth of the crisis. He is viewed unfavorably across almost every single demographic. The only age bracket where he maintains traction is the 30 to 45 demographic.
What about income brackets?
The only income bracket where he holds a net positive view is among those earning over $100,000 a year. The working class coalition he spent years building is actively abandoning him.
And when the public polling collapses, the internal caucus discipline shatters. The sources detail a crumbling inner circle.
Yeah, Katie Merrifield, his communications director, resigned on the exact same day Marilyn Gladu defected.
That timing is not an accident.
No, not at all. She was replaced by Micah Green. But honestly, the most strategically baffling detail in these reports is Poilievre's treatment of his own MPs.
Oh, this part blew my mind. He reportedly demanded that his critic MPs, his shadow cabinet, formally justify their roles to him in one-on-one meetings.
It is a stunning miscalculation of political capital. In a Westminster parliamentary system, a party leader's power is entirely derived from the confidence of their caucus.
Exactly. Strategically, that makes zero sense. If you are dropping in the polls and your MPs are terrified of losing their pensions and their careers because of your personal unpopularity, why would you actively antagonize the only people keeping you in power?
You wouldn't, or you shouldn't.
Making nervous MPs effectively re-interview for the jobs they already hold creates an incredibly toxic environment of low morale and paranoia.
And when an MP's instinct for self-preservation overrides their fear of the leader's office, you see the kind of mutiny we are watching unfold right now.
Yeah, the rumors in our sources suggest Poilievre may actually resign if Carney secures that majority on April 13th. And that up to 10 more conservative MPs are currently negotiating floor-crossing deals.
And more.
Which, honestly, we have recent historical precedent for this exact dynamic. The Conservative caucus mercilessly forced out Aaron O'Toole just a few years ago for far less.
Oh, yeah. They utilized the provisions of the Reform Act to trigger a leadership review and basically decapitated him overnight.
So if Poilievre cannot radically pivot his communication style to present a more multidimensional, reassuring figure to the broader electorate, his leadership might literally end before the summer.
But, you know, the urgency driving this conservative panic and the corresponding liberal surge, it cannot be analyzed in a vacuum. Both of these phenomena are direct reactions to a massive existential threat looming over the border.
Right. We have to look at the Trump factor.
We really do.
The geopolitical context is the engine driving this entire domestic realignment. Donald Trump has returned to the U.S. presidency. The polling shows 61% of Canadians are explicitly afraid of his administration.
61%. And for good reason. Trump has threatened sweeping, punitive tariffs on key Canadian economic sectors. Furthermore, sources note he has casually floated the idea of making Canada the 51st state.
Whether it is political bluster or genuine policy intent, the threat level perceived by the Canadian public is at a generational high.
Which totally explains the Carney magnet.
The Carney magnet, I like that.
Yeah, MPs aren't just fleeing Poilievre's plummeting poll numbers. They are actively seeking shelter under Carney's resume.
Right, because floor crossers like Matt Jeneroux and Marilyn Gladu explicitly cite Carney's background as a dual G7 central bank governor running both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England.
The electorate is experiencing a profound flight to safety. When voters look at the prospect of brutal trade negotiations with a very unpredictable U.S. administration, they look at Ottawa and demand a crisis manager.
Jeneroux actually pointed specifically to a speech Carney delivered at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Carney aggressively condemned economic coercion by great powers and outlined a framework for middle powers to band together to protect their sovereignty.
It was a viral moment in diplomatic circles that really cemented his reputation as a heavy hitter on the global stage.
And you can see it in the direct comparison in the polling. Ipsos data shows Carney holding a +9 net favorability, meaning he is actively outperforming his own party's brand.
Right, well, Poilievre is at -26.
Exactly. When voters are asked who has the temperament to handle Trump, Poilievre is widely viewed as lacking the necessary maturity. On managing tough economic times, Carney leads Poilievre by 15 points. On representing Canada on the world stage, Carney leads by a massive 13 points.
However, we really have to look closely at the tracking polls to understand the nuance of this conservative crisis. Because while liaison strategies shows the Liberals pulling ahead nationally, trackers like Innovative Research show the Conservative Party still holding a 9 to 14-point lead nationally.
Wait, really? A 9 to 14-point lead?
Yeah. They remain absolutely dominant in Western Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba.
Okay, that is a crucial distinction, because if the party is still leading in the aggregate polls, but the leader is deeply unpopular, it proves this is a crisis of personnel, not ideology.
Exactly. Voters aren't necessarily abandoning conservative principles. They are abandoning Pierre Poilievre.
Right. They are exhausted by a decade of liberal governance. But when faced with the immediate, terrifying reality of Donald Trump, they simply don't trust Poilievre to steer the ship.
And the floor crossers are attempting to thread that exact needle. They are betting that their voters will forgive the partisan betrayal if they deliver economic security.
But, setting the motivations aside, the actual mechanics and morality of floor crossing represent one of the most divisive issues in Canadian democratic theory.
It really is. It feels like an incredibly rare betrayal when it happens, but the historical data tells a completely different story.
How common is it?
Over 300 MPs have crossed the floor since Confederation in 1867.
300.
Yeah. Sir John A. Macdonald, Canada's first Prime Minister, holds the historical record. He engineered the defection of 9 opposition MPs to his benches.
Wow.
The practice happens in distinct historical bursts, usually during periods of massive ideological realignment or national crisis.
But just because there is historical precedent doesn't mean it sits comfortably with the modern electorate. I mean, if I knock on doors, donate money, and cast a ballot for a conservative candidate based on a specific manifesto, and 3 months later that MP joins the Liberal government, my vote was functionally hijacked.
Oh, yeah, the fundamental question is whether this should even be legally permissible.
And the Angus Reid Institute data perfectly captures the national ambivalence on this. The country is split exactly down the middle. 43% of Canadians believe floor crossing should be allowed, and 43% believe it should be outright banned.
But the nuance is really in the consequences. 41% of respondents believe that an MP who changes parties must immediately resign their seat and face the voters in a by-election.
They view the Democratic mandate as belonging to the party platform, not the individual charm or local brand of the politician.
Exactly. But honestly, the hypocrisy regarding this issue is entirely dependent on which team is winning.
Oh, for sure.
The sources track the shifting partisan views over the last decade. In 2018, when Leona Alislev crossed the floor from the governing Liberals to the opposition Conservatives, 57% of Conservative voters suddenly believed floor crossing was a noble, acceptable practice.
And now?
Fast forward to today, with their MPs bleeding over to Mark Carney, and 78% of Conservatives now demand an absolute ban.
So situational.
Highly situational. But the academic research provided in our sources breaks down the architecture of defection pretty well. They categorize floor crossers into 3 distinct buckets.
Let's go through those. What's the first one?
The first category is the pure opportunist. These are high-profile individuals who cross the floor in exchange for immediate proximity to power, usually a guaranteed cabinet portfolio.
Right. The historical examples there are pretty stark. Belinda Stronach in 2005, who left the Conservatives to become a Liberal cabinet minister, or David Emerson in 2006, who won his riding as a Liberal and stunned the country by joining Stephen Harper's Conservative cabinet less than 2 weeks later.
Less than 2 weeks. Yeah, that was wild. So
Yeah.
that's the opportunist. The second category represents the ideologues who feel abandoned by their own camp.
And this accurately describes current defectors like Chris D'Entremont and Matt Jeneroux.
Exactly. They are moderate veterans who watched their party take a hard-right populist turn under Poilievre. Their argument is essentially, I didn't leave the Conservative Party left me.
Right. And the third category?
The third category consists of MPs prioritizing highly specific, localized interests over national party dynamics. Lori Idlout's defection from the NDP to the Liberals fits this mold perfectly.
Because her calculus is that the unique, pressing issues facing her Nunavut constituents require a direct voice inside the governing caucus, rather than just shouting from the opposition benches.
Right, but regardless of the moral justification, whether it's raw ambition, ideological purity, or local pragmatism, what happens to these MPs when they actually have to face the voters again?
Well, the academic consensus is brutal. Voters historically punish floor crossers with devastating consistency.
Oh, yeah.
While Marilyn, Gladu, and the others are currently enjoying standing ovations from the liberal benches and glowing profiles in the press, the data shows they face an incredibly steep uphill battle to win re-election.
Riding associations are stripped of funds, local volunteers feel betrayed and refuse to door knock, and constituents rarely forgive the perceived subversion of their original vote.
It is the ultimate political wager. They might secure Mark Carney a historic majority today, but they are highly likely to lose their own careers in 2029.
Yeah, that's a very real possibility. We have covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. We analyzed the stunning defection of Marilyn Gladu, the razor-thin parliamentary math driving Mark Carney's quest for a shortcut majority, the complete polling collapse of Pierre Poilievre, the existential threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, and the deep historical and ethical complexities of floor crossing.
This has genuinely been a tectonic week in Canadian politics. We are watching a prime minister attempt the near impossible feat of securing a majority without calling an election.
We're watching the leader of the opposition fight a rearguard action against his own terrifyingly nervous caucus. The very architecture of the House of Commons is shifting by the hour.
But, zooming out from the daily drama, the sources point to a massive systemic shift in how Canadian politics functions at its core.
And this is the part that really got me thinking. The underlying premise of the Canadian Westminster system is strict, almost unyielding party discipline. In a normal environment, MPs are fiercely loyal soldiers.
Right. The Prime Minister's office or the leader of the opposition dictates the party line, and the MPs vote accordingly.
And the mechanics of that discipline are ruthless. If you defy the leader, the party whip removes you from prestigious committees. The leader refuses to sign your nomination papers for the next election, effectively ending your career. You do what the boss says, or you are cast out into the political wilderness.
But this current wave of defections suggests that the ultimate threat of party discipline is losing its teeth.
Yes.
We are watching MPs actively prioritize their personal ideologies, the specific economic needs of their ridings, or their perception of national security over the demands of their party leader.
If an MP realizes that they can simply switch teams when the leader alienates them, if the threat of being kicked out of the party is met with a shrug and a walk across the aisle, the entire power structure of Ottawa inverts.
Totally inverts.
So the big question we have to leave you with is this. Are we watching the death of the all-powerful Canadian party leader? If a leader's control over their caucus is merely conditional, based on their daily poll numbers rather than institutional loyalty, the fundamental stability of how governments are formed and maintained in this country is permanently altered.
It really forces a redesign of the entire political ecosystem. Leaders will have to negotiate with their caucuses rather than command them.
A fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying prospect for anyone trying to whip a vote in Ottawa right now. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep a very close eye on those April 13 by-elections, especially the logistical nightmare unfolding in Terrebonne and the continuing internal revolt within the Conservative Party. We'll see you next time.